All right, nenga zabetsek este, komatsotso este, ungan komatsotso este. Right, ungan. I think we are ungan. We are live. Stemangagi hit Instagram. All right, I'm checking now if we are live on YouTube. We are live. Yep, there we are. Again, we are live on YouTube, and I'm checking now to make sure we are on Facebook. Again, we are live on Facebook as well. Right. Okay, Biba. All right. Hafade todos hamzu gwena hudzung estigi un webun episode Fanachu. Hafade. This is a new episode of Fanachu. Guahui host Mizu. Inanusi Michael Lujan Bavakwa. Welcome to another episode of Fanachu. I am your host again, Michael Lujan Bavakwa, and Munga Malafesta Husingani Hamzu. I told you May is Museum Month, and that means that we're going to talk about museums. Now, some of you might be, of course, you might recall that I am the curator at the Guam Museum, so we often talk about museums on Fanachu. But during May, we usually try to have episodes where we bring on people connected to museums. We bring on curators with roots in the Marianas. We talk about museums in the Marianas. We talk about collections. We talk about repatriations, rematriations, all of that wonderful stuff that's happening in the islands and out in the Chamorro diaspora. And so it is with this in mind that I wanted to end Museum Month 2026 by talking about an amazing project, the Homeward Project that's happening at the Museum of Us. And some of you that are in the Chamorro diaspora, you're thinking Museum of Us. I know that. I know about the Museum of Us. Didn't it used to be called something else? Isn't it the Museum of Man? The Museum of the Man, Hungan? I know that place. And so you're thinking about that, and yes, this is an important museum in San Diego. It's a very old museum, but the Homeward Project is an amazing project which more museums should be doing, in which we're going to learn about today about looking at the collections that they have from all sorts of communities around the world and really ethically examining how can they connect these collections to the communities that they come from, to talk about exhibiting them, to talk about returning them, to talk about moving ahead past the histories that brought those collections into the museum itself. And so what makes this particularly exciting is that earlier this year, the Museum of Us, the guests that we're talking to today, worked with those of us in Guam at the Guam Museum and the Guam Cultural Repository through the Homeward Project to bring home to the Marianas more than 100 amazing pieces from their collection. And so I'm so excited to have with me here today to talk about the Homeward Project, but also to talk about the particularities of this amazing return that happened and is ongoing. We have with us here on the podcast, we have Jesi Lujan Bennett, who has been on Fanachu before. Again, a favorite episode talking about the Chamorro diaspora and how you should totally, if you see a Guam sticker on somebody's car, you should totally leave a note. You should totally, and if you see somebody with like a Guam shirt, you should totally go up and say Hafaday to them, because there's only about 200,000 of us in the world, and we definitely need some Inafa Maulik, and we need more support for each other. But we've also joined by Lylliam Posadas from the Museum of Us here, and first time on Fanachu. And so I want to give them a chance, first of all, to introduce themselves, and then we're going to learn a little bit of the history of the Museum of Us, and then we're going to talk about the Homeward Project and about the Chamorro return. And so, Jesi, why don't I hand it off to you first? Continue and introduce in Maisahau. Put
Sure.
favor.
All right, sounds good. Hafide Todos Hamzu. Thanks everyone for joining on whatever platform you're watching. My name is Jesi Lujan Bennett. My family's from Barrigada, and I have family in Dededo as well in Guahan. I also call Kumi Islands or San Diego home, as well as Ohope in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I'm really grateful to be here again. I'm a big fan of Fanachu, and looking forward to sharing more about what we're doing at the Museum of Us.
Sidus Masi. Sidus Masi. And Lylliam, I hand it off to you now. Go ahead and introduce yourself, por favor.
Thank you. We're happy to be here and have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Lylliam Posadas, and I'm the Colonial Pathways Repatriation Manager at the Museum of Us. I've been there for about 4 years in this new kind of role that enables us to do a lot of repatriations internationally, which is really great. And I am, although I work in San Diego and I drive down there from LA, where I'm currently based here in Tongva territory, Tongva land. And yeah, so looking forward to sharing more about the work we're doing.
Oh, Sidus Masi. Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Sidus Masi Parifinatun Midzu. Thank you for being here on this podcast. And it always warms my soul to just hear about repatriation and museums. And so this is just awesome. Hungan makes my museum month. Hungan. And so let's talk about the Museum of Us, because I think for some people, especially when I was talking to people about the Museum of Us, first off, some people were not familiar with the rebranding. Some people are familiar with it by its old name. And so, and some people were surprised sort of by these types of things being in the museum, the fact that it has an extensive collection, the fact that it had Chamorro artifacts and stuff from all over the world and so on. And so, but I think this speaks to sort of the long history of the Museum of Us. And so can we get kind of an outline of how long the museum's been around and what type of museum it is? Because I think that'll help people understand why it might have, hundreds of items from Micronesia and the Marianas.
Sure, sounds good. I forgot in my intro to say what I do at the museum, so I think that's an important part of, I guess, understanding the museum itself. So I'll weave it all together for folks that are listening. So my position is called the Director of Decolonizing Initiatives. We have museums in our networks that we collaborate with who, might have positions with that do similar things, maybe with different types of names and whatnot. But it really is an innovative and forward-thinking move on the part of Museum of Us to have a position like this where, putting money where their mouth is to really reckon with the history of this place. The history of this place is old, is over 100 years old, and is actually quite interesting for folks because, like you're saying, many Chamorros who are listening right now might be back home or might be in San Diego or elsewhere. And, at one point or another, many Chamorros make their way to San Diego, and you would be really familiar with our building. You fly over it when you come into San Diego. It is the museum that has a large, colorful rotunda. It has a tower as well. It's one of those iconic landmarks for the city. So you'd probably be familiar with it if you've ever come to the city. Our museum was built in 1915 as a part of the Panama, California Exposition. It was a period of celebration for multiple countries, especially the United States, to celebrate the opening of the Panama Canal. Our museum was one of 4 original buildings from that period, so it's us. We have a large bridge right across from our building that's right there. That's a part of the 1915 buildings of the time. We have the organ pavilion, and we have the botanical garden. So we are part of the original footprint of Balboa Park. Our museum was created in the same vein as the World's Fairs of those times, so really to celebrate the technology that was coming out. But a lot of it was at the expense of Indigenous communities and communities of color. And I really push folks, if you are interested in World's Fairs or museums and their origins, there's a lot of material out there to read and to engage with to understand, what was happening, especially at the turn of the century. Our museum has been collecting since 1915, so over 100 years of taking in what we call cultural resources, and maybe other museums will call them artifacts or specimens, things like that. But we have nearly over 100,000 cultural resources in our stewardship and care at our museum, and this includes what some folks would call ethnographic material, archival holdings as well. We have about over 300,000 archaeological items within our care. We have over 4,000 ancestors as well. 200 of those are from Native communities and are already in consultation under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So making sure we're getting ancestors home as fast as we can. But we also have, almost 4,000 Euro-American, Indigenous, Peruvian, and Southeast Asian ancestors as well under our care. Many of those are part of former scientific study collections. So we're figuring out in real time how to get folks back to their home communities and interrogate like what it means to be a part of a science study collection in those ways. So in total, we have over 400 different Indigenous communities represented in our cultural resources that we look after, we care for, and we steward and do a lot of work with, which you all are going to hear about today. The kind of history of our museum is one that we are reckoning with in real time and that we're really transparent with when it comes to the public, the work that we do. We don't hold secrets in our museum. It really is about transparency. A lot of the collecting practices that started when we began as a museum until we stopped collecting and bringing in cultural items into our collections have really problematic ways that they found their way into our care. So what you're going to hear today about the Homeward Project and what we're doing under these kind of decolonial initiatives is really based in our collections or based in our cultural resources, because how things were taken and stolen really then, the pain is in the cultural resources in our collections, and then it kind of seeps into all the ways that a museum functions. So it was seen in how our first exhibit was put together, which was called Man's Variation, using busts and facial casts from communities of color and Indigenous peoples to talk about racial identity and talk about racial hierarchy or perceived racial hierarchies. It came out in the way that research was produced, and a lot of the research from early archaeologists and anthropologists at our museum went on to do really destructive things in terms of informing policy in the United States, policy in Australia, to the detriment of Indigenous communities and First Nations peoples. So there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of violence in the history of the museum, but it's something that we are actively working with and trying to be upfront about. The truth-telling, accountability is a big part of these conversations. Trying to be inclusive in the work that we do now, and really trying to change the systems, the practices, and the policies that we have within our institution. And it's represented in things like our name change. We've had 3 different names or so over time. Most folks will remember us as the Museum of Man. Today we are the Museum of Us. So really trying to change, again, that inclusiveness and the belonging that people can feel to a place like our museum that has a very tumultuous history, but one that is worth reckoning with so that we can build something new together.
Sidus Masi. Thank you so much, Jesi, for that history. And Lylliam, would you like to add anything in terms of the history of the Museum of Us and 3 name changes? That's I was only aware of 2, so 3 is.
Yeah, are you referring to the San Diego Museum of Man? Yes, okay.
Yeah, the variations, and then community got to the wider community of San Diego that had a hand in the change. So some folks are really surprised, like you said, like, what are you trying to do? Is your museum trying to be woke? And it's like, no, this has been happening over time. It was something that has been requested by the wider San Diego community for quite a while. It just the timing of the change had the general public going, huh? But it's been an ongoing kind of conversation. But I think it's a great representation of museums can change, even if they're old and perceived as dusty and not applicable to many of our lives. It's like, no, we can change the way that that people want to come, that things can be inclusive, accessible, and representative of the times that we live. It's just, where is your museum and its staff and its board and wider community at with making those changes, and how are they prioritizing making new futures? So
Yeah, I think for museums that are, 100 years old, I think some of the older museums in the country are about that age, and I think it's very hopeful to see that they can change, that institutions that are that old can change. And I think, 100 years can feel for like a long time, but it really isn't, right? Many of our communities have been around preserving our cultural heritage and telling our stories for a very long time. I think as someone who grew up in Southern California and who visited the museum when it was a museum of man, I would have never expected it to change as much as it has. So it's given me a lot of hope to witness that change and to be now working there and witnessing how the work is happening internally with a real effort towards that truth telling and that reckoning, and not just moving on to a new chapter, but really reckoning with the harm and the pain in the history and in the collecting history of the museum.
To Zeus Masi. Thank you. I love that. That's such an important truth there, Lylliam. I think because when some people might say, "Oh yeah, the museum," Jesi, to your point, the museum's gone woke. I don't know. Even when I first heard about the Museum of Man, I was like, "That's such a weird name." I mean, I mean, maybe that made sense 100 years ago, but yeah, that's I wouldn't want to be judged by the slang I used when I was, like in the 90s or the 80s, the Museum of Rad. No, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Or the Museum of Whoomp, there it is. No, 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 let's not do that. Let's not do that. And so yeah, updating it, but then to kind of I love the idea of updating and fixing, rethinking and changing and giving hope for it too. Because even we're going to talk about the Homeward Project now, and then even going through the process of working with you all at the Museum of Us, but then even just kind of learning what it was, and then how a museum kind of looked at everything that it had and its past and history, and then kind of just wanted to reimagine. It was just it's exciting to see, especially when we think about what the image of the museum that so many people have. It's a good example. It's a good example. And so I'm excited for more people to hear about sort of what the Museum of Us has been up to lately. And so let's talk then specifically about like what the Homeward Project, what that refers to, because I think most people kind of understand what a repatriation refers to, or a return, but I think a lot of those might be kind of directed to, or a lot of them in the past historically are communities going and kind of requesting things or demanding things and insisting and fighting for things. But the Homeward Project represents something which is a little bit more proactive on behalf of the institution. And so I'm excited to kind of for you to share more about that. And so let's talk about the Homeward Project. Por favor.
Sure. I think proactive is one of those key kind of tenets of the Museum of Us. Be proactive. We listen and we move and we try new things. And sometimes it works and it sticks, and sometimes it doesn't. And we're a place that's willing to just give it a go and try, because not all. Again, we're in a community of museums that are trying to make changes. And others are in their own journeys, but it's a great place to be, where everyone is just willing to give something a go and see how it's received by the wider community and by our field with other museums. So the Homeward Project is one of many initiatives that we have at the museum that really is, again, about reckoning with our past and doing right by the Indigenous communities in which our museum has done great harm to. The Homeward Project came out of, I guess, a little history about it. It came from our board of trustees, and I think that's what makes it a really strong kind of project or initiative for our museum to have. Our trustees got together for their yearly retreat. The theme for that year was to look at going beyond allyship and what that means for a museum. And I guess one of the ending questions that they had for trustees is, what is your wish for our museum this year and beyond? And after much discussion across, the various trustees that were there, they came to the conclusion that the museum will never be free until our cultural resources that we stored are sent back to their homes and back to their communities. With the caveat that if that's what communities want, right? It's always what do folks want us to do for them. So our trustees, after having that retreat and coming to that conclusion, said, go for it, start putting together a plan to really have belongings go home. We, as a museum, already had practices in place around our cultural resources when it comes to stewardship and for consent. We already had a practice where we no longer we no longer take gifts or donations or anything like that. We are no longer accessioning anything into our cultural resources. We are fully in repatriation mode, rematriation mode, depending on how you look at things, but fully in return mode. And again, with consent, what do folks want? What does it look like? And what does ownership look like? And we can talk about that more as our conversation goes on. So when our board said, okay, go for it, we came up with the Homeward Project as a team. This includes my department, which is Decolonizing Initiatives. And I work now with and in cultural resources with a team of folks to make sure this initiative goes on and is successful. It is about maybe a little bit more, but about 3 years where we are accelerating the returns to communities, to Indigenous communities, to other communities of color as well. And as I shared earlier, we have a lot of belongings under our care. So really this 3 years is, again, an acceleration of returns, knowing that the decades of problematic collecting that was happening in our anthropology museum is going to take way more than our time at the museum to make right. When it comes to doing right by folks that we've harmed, again, it's going to outlive Lylliam and I's positions and being at this institution. But the Homeward Project really is to give that needed boost, give the extra resources and people power and monetary resources to move things along quicker. Before the Homeward Project, we had about 3 to 4 folks within cultural resources doing this work. And now I've joined their team and we've hired quite a few more folks to be a part of this 3-year project to get things home both domestically and internationally. Lylliam, do you want to share anything that I might have missed about the Homeward Project?
It is this, so like Jesi acknowledged, we have a long history of collecting. So it is going to take longer than just these 3 years, but these 3 years are this concerted effort that at the very least we are aiming to build relationships, to open doors to conversations about how belongings can be returned and start planning and plotting that out in collaboration with folks. And I'd also like to add that the board continues to be incredibly supportive. Like they've been volunteering their time towards these efforts too, which has been really wonderful. And that's a great opportunity for them to get, a deeper sense of what this work looks like on the ground and to imagine ways that they can continue to offer support.
Absolutely.
Oh, Biba. This is wow. I mean, it is so refreshing and inspiring to hear because I think one of the components that's always missing is just like because and in hearing about different kind of returns, repatriations, rematriations whenever they happen, a lot of times just one of the Jesi, one of the things that you mentioned that you foregrounded at the beginning is kind of just that simple act of talking to communities about where they're at and what they want. Just that simple thing is almost always lost because usually it's dictated by kind of like that the institution is following a law or we're running out of space. We need to get rid of this. You need to take it now, or you can't have it because we don't want to give it up. Or there's all these other demands which are dictating the conversation. And so whatever the community that this belongs to, whatever they're feeling, wherever they're at, is is inconsequential. And so whether they really want it, or whether they're not ready for it, or whether they really would actually want to have a conversation to think about partnering, collaborating, like it just doesn't even matter, because they're not even considered to be a partner in it. And so just the fact that at the start of it, that you're already kind of prioritizing that this is really like, where are these communities at? Like, would they like them back? Do they want them back? What is it that they need in terms of the resources that we have? Like that is so key in terms of helping communities, which, and I can speak from Chamorros, which in Micronesia, in the Micronesian region, have more resources than other Micronesian islanders. But when you're talking about other Micronesian islanders, which undergo their own processes of repatriation, a lot of times would love a conversation in which somebody said, "We have some of your stuff, but where are you at? You know, would you like it now? Do you have plans to build a facility to hold these? Do you want to work with us on exhibiting them somewhere? Like, what can we help you with?" And so just that alone just shows a real care, like a real care involved, and a real and so I wanted to hear more about that, because that's so many institutions, even well-meaning institutions, which might have sort of the fanciness in other ways, the fancy friendliness in other ways, they're just not there. They're just not really there yet. And so I wanted to kind of hear more about where that comes from, because it's very practical and it's very obvious, but it's easily lost in long, old, big institutions dealing with smaller communities. And so whichever one of you kind of wants to kind of talk about that, because for me it's powerful, it's meaningful, it's so important, but it's so rare. And so Jesi, would you like to, or Lylliam?
Go ahead, Jesi.
I'll make it real short because I think Lylliam, you'd be able to answer this really nicely. We move at the speed of community. We try not to have any barriers. We, as a museum, have, like I said, a very problematic, fraught history with Indigenous communities, and we are really working on a relational repair with everyone. And it takes time and it takes trust. And part of doing right is making sure that we're talking to folks, we're transparent about what we have in our cultural resources, and we let people know they don't have to come to us. It's a part of our due diligence to do right. So we contact people, we have conversations, and that's what it really is about building those relationships and in hearing where people are in real time. And again, we're not trying to put up any barriers. So if a community is not building a cultural center or a museum or whatever it is, that's okay, because these are not our belongings. We shouldn't have had them in the first place. And it really is up to these folks of, the homelands, the home group, the home peoples, and the diaspora as well, because we try to include diasporic peoples in these conversations. But moving at the speed of community and being really open to thinking creatively together about what ownership looks like, what a return looks like, and what they would like to do. Because at the end of the day, again, we shouldn't have had any of these belongings and ancestors in our care to begin with. And I know some folks might be putting in the comments now or later, like, well, at least it's preserved and at least it's this and that. But, when we're going through the records and the gift receipts and things like that, it's really painful to read. And sometimes we're not of these communities, just to see how things were taken. And there's just so many examples of how, violent these processes have been. So we don't put up barriers. We try to be as easy as possible. So that was just like a high, like off the cuff, like off just initial thoughts. But I think Lylliam, you would have some really great examples of just like how we do this and why.
Yeah, sure. I think that the Homeward Project is really building on the Museum of Us, our commitment to repatriation through the Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act, and through our own internal policy, the Colonial Pathways policy, which it requires the museum to obtain consent from communities when we are stewarding their belongings. And if we can obtain that consent, then to move forward with the process of return, and to return whenever possible and whenever that's desired by the community. And we have a process and a way to do that and make decisions around that. So I think those two commitments are really the foundation on which we're trying to approach this larger concerted effort, for returns. And as Jesi mentioned, when we're going through, and I think people who work very intimately on repatriation or rematriation cases know this, that when you're going through the archives and the accession files and the donor files, and you're going through the paperwork, there's a lot in there where it's you can see the inequity. You can see the kind of the thinking expressed on paper for why things were collected, and the sometimes deeply inappropriate, unethical ways in which they were collected, often described very cavalierly, and with a certain sense of arrogance or superiority that is troubling. And I think as we're moving through that work internally, when we want to then engage others in returning their belongings, we also don't want to create a re-traumatizing experience, right? In sharing all of this violent history. And I think there's a fine line to balance, because we also want that history to be known. We want to tell the truth, and we want to reckon with it. But we also want to be caring in that experience and acknowledge that it is hurtful to acquaint yourself with that history, to reacquaint yourself with that history, to sit with it. And so I think that motivates us to look at other barriers that we can control. Like, for example, when we're working on a NAG repatriation, we won't add additional or parallel bureaucracies to that repatriation process. We use the NAGPRA process as the repatriation process. And when we look at our Colonial Pathways policy returns, we also have a very simple and straightforward process for that, so that we're not putting people in positions where they need to defend the right to their own belongings or the right to their own ancestors. But instead they're thinking through how are we going to do this? And I think because we have so much support from the board, and everyone at the institution is on board with this work, we're all kind of, we have the same vision. It gives us a lot of liberty to be creative and to think through solutions for the logistics and the mechanics of returning things, rather than trying to battle out why or make a case for why things need to be returned, because we've already arrived there. And so I think when we're establishing relationships, I think there's for the past maybe 5-10 years, there's been this emphasis in the museum field on building relationships and the importance of building relationships with communities. But relationships can be bad, right? You can have a bad relationship, you can have a harmful relationship, and you're still tied to each other because of that history. And there's a relationship there, an inevitable one. But, I think aiming for a good one and trying to understand what that means that you need to listen to your partner, and what do they need? How can we support each other? How can we do this well? And just think things through. So I think we also think through, we try to offer a variety of different options to meet people where they are at. So, for example, if folks are not ready for whatever reason to have their belongings physically returned for any reason, right? It may be that their facility isn't up to their own standards, not our standards, but their own standards, or they're in the process of building a facility, or there are practices or songs that they're working on revitalizing and they're not ready to take on the responsibility of certain items, whatever it may be, we will still support a repatriation. That ownership and control, we think, is very important for the community to have. And we can then hold their belongings at the museum until they're ready to be returned. So we try to think of different options. Or if it means that they're ready and they want them physically returned immediately, we can do that. Like we will, we have because we're focusing on that good relationship, it allows us to listen and hopefully develop the kind of environment where people can tell us what they need support with, so we can find something that works.
No, Lylliam, thank you so much, because in a way you answered some of the questions that people were texting me, because there was some people who were feeling, and it's a natural thing to feel that artifacts, belongings are precious treasures. They should be returned as soon as possible. But the realities, and for those who work in museums, those who work in heritage, in heritage positions, we know that every community is different, as you were mentioning, that sometimes a community may feel we can't take care of this yet, or some of it they may feel like and some of it might be because the government may be in a different place than the cultural practitioners, but that's something that community has to figure out. Because this is something that happens in the Marianas, where, like, at least for me in the museum, we're always ready to kind of take things, but in the Northern Marianas Islands, their government sometimes isn't ready. They don't want to take things because they feel like we have other things to focus on. So when repatriation possibilities come up, the government there, not necessarily the museum, but the government there says this can't be a focus for us. And so but that's the thing, though, is that it's good to have a museum that's willing to work with the community, because the community needs to figure out, well, where are we at? What resources do we have? And then, but I really liked what you mentioned there, and this was something that in the past, it wasn't often part of the negotiations or the equation, where something can be returned, but it can still be held.
Mhm.
And that's key for a lot of, especially smaller communities, where the museum, like you were saying, the cultural center, the repository is down the line. They're funding, they're getting grants for it. They're trying to, they want to make it, but they can't take it on yet. And they feel uncertain, maybe if you can hold it for a while. And so it's great to have that trust. It's great to have that trust. And so, yes, I understand what some people were saying in terms of get it back as soon as possible, but that's why it's ideal if you can work with an institution and have that relationship where they understand, as Lylliam was saying, we will give, if you want it back, then take it right now. We will facilitate that. But if you don't feel that you're ready, then we'll, as Jesi said, we'll move at the speed of the community. And so that's a real partnership right there. That's oh my goodness, yeah. I don't know, what is it, swipe right or is it swipe left? Which is good? Which is good? Because I've never used a dating app before, but I can't remember. Anyways, but and so oh, Jesi, go ahead.
I feel like I lost my train of thought with that Tinder reference. Thanks, Maget. No, but yeah, moving at the speed of communities is the biggest part of this. And we as we get into the thick of things with the Homeward Project and moving things forward at this accelerated pace. We have part of our team that worked on domestic returns, which is really great, and it helps move things quicker along with different tribal nations that we, again, steward so many of their belongings. And then Lylliam and I are the ones that are focusing more on the international side of the returns. For me, because of my roots in Oceania, because I'm Chamorro, a lot of the responsibility that I feel is to our blue continent and to our peoples. And so when this opportunity came up and I have someone like Lylliam that I can have like a really strong thought partner with, letting them know that I have these kinds of genealogical connections, that I also have these kind of really great friends and colleagues that we can talk with, to learn from, to make our returns to Oceania happen at a quicker pace. And I think that's where the Guam Museum came up. That's where the NMI Museum of Heritage and Culture, under the directorship of Leonard. It's been really helpful to have those kind of established ties too, because we are learning from you all, because your work has come to fruition where you've seen so many returns to the museum, and Leonard has also seen returns back to the NMI as well. So learning from you all, but then going, even if we're of the same, if we're all of Oceania, it doesn't mean that the returns will move at the same pace, or that communities are ready, or that yeah, we just learn for each community. Lylliam's also working with Indigenous groups in Mexico and Peru, and there's a steep learning curve, even if we do have contacts and things like that, because not only are you working with the home communities whose belongings that we have, but we're also considering, well, what does it mean that these Indigenous groups are within nation states that have their own governments that we might have to consider as well. So it's again, 3 years where we're just going for it, but it's really helpful to have trustees that are volunteering to help us with, let's say, research. We have graduate students who are also helping on the research side of things, helping us figure out, like, how do you do this? Different kind of colonial systems, different ways of thinking, institutions that we may or may not know of. So it's really helpful to also just know, like, where are returns happening? Where are these repatriations taking place, or rematriations? And who are folks that we can talk to both on the institutional side to learn from? How are they putting this together in terms of resources? What was their experiences like to learn just from, colleagues? And then going, hey, folks who are on the home end that are getting your belongings home, and what is that process like? And so with you all, and with, again, the NMI Museum, it's been helpful so that we know on both ends, like, as a museum, what is it like? As Indigenous museum practitioners, like, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What kind of support do you need? You're helping our museum in our work, in our justice work, and freeing us of this kind of pain that we have in our cultural resources. So what does it mean to learn from you all and have a truly reciprocal relationship? And that, that goes beyond giving things back. Giving back belongings is just the bare minimum, because, again, like I said earlier, we shouldn't have had it in the first place. So once you help us in that, what does it look like for the museum to say, okay, now as a relationship, how can we foster this to help you all, or to just be better colleagues and friends? So every country, every community has been a different learning experience. But I will say, with you all at the Guam Museum and with the NMI Museum as well, beginning, like, super helpful thinking about a framework to do this in a way that makes sense for everyone, people back home, but also makes sense for us at the museum.
No, Sidus Mase. No, Sidus Mase. I have definitely learned a lot from the two of you and from your team at the Museum of Us. It was and we should definitely look at some of the wonderful items that have been returned. Some people are like, show us the artifacts, show us the artifacts.
These are
And
just some
so-
of them. And I think, Lylliam, I think this might be a good point to just say a little bit about, through the Colonial Pathways policy, how some belongings are back home, and then some of us, we are still stewarding, and, like, how we do that. Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, so before I jump into that, I just want to highlight, like, Jesi's role in this work, because um, the fact that Jesi's connected to, like, has relationships is has been so instrumental in how we've been able to work and the pace we've been able to work at. If I was doing this by myself, I know it would have taken longer. I know that, so I'm just very appreciative of those relationships. And I think it's important for any museum folks out there listening, that you may have staff that have wonderful relationships, and, value with communities, and valuing that and appreciating that, and allowing that to be brought to the forefront is so important. So with this repatriation, we're doing it in waves. So we've completed a first wave of physically returning belongings. However, there are still belongings being held at the Museum of Us, and that is with the consent of the community. So we have them currently in our care while we plan the second wave of returns, and while we also have conversations about whether any belongings will stay on loan to the Museum of Us for diaspora communities in San Diego or for any other reason. But the important thing to mention is that they are now all they've all been repatriated. So the Museum of Us does not have legal ownership or control over these belongings. That has been transferred over to the Guam Museum. So at any point, the museum, because they are now the Guam Museum rather, they are now the owners. They control these belongings. They can request that they be returned, or they can loan things, or they can make decisions about how they're cared for, who has access, all of that. And that's what's very so critically important, is having that control, because there are also cases out there where loans are made to communities, uh, but that legal ownership and control isn't established. And that still creates a very unequal situation where you may not have that decision-making power. So we really emphasize providing that legal ownership and control, and then working out the logistics of how people need to have their belongings returned.
Oh, that's no, thank you. Thank you for that. Because one of the things that I think a lot of people, when you're really thinking about what a community might want, I think some communities may feel strongly about particular items coming home, but there may also be a desire that some remain overseas, away, and if there's possibilities that they be shown, if there's possibilities that there could be a partnership that it could educate, and so I think that having that conversation is important. That was, I think in repatriation conversations, very lopsided, unequal conversations in the past, it was never really a possibility. It was always kind of like there was always that pettiness, like, oh, you got your stuff back. You natives, you won. Take your shite and get out of here. You know, and it's like but it doesn't need to be like that. It's kind of like, like both of you have said, there's violence attached to a lot of this collecting, but that does not mean it needs to define what happens from now on. What defines what happens from now on is how we act and sort of the decisions that we make. And so that's why kind of what Lylliam, what you were talking about there in terms of like decision making about exhibits and stuff like that is great, because if, for example, items remained in the Museum of Us's care for a few more years, but there was a possibility that it could be exhibited there or somewhere, that, then work with the community that owns it. And it creates, I mean, Jesi, it reminds me that, when me and Nicole de la Dueñas, when we first met with you about this return, it wasn't just talking about the items themselves, but you also then mentioned kind of, is there any other things that we could help with, like in terms of like networking, or other ways that we could help, because, and that was so important. And so
Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
sharing some images here now, and all the
Yeah.
Manumku are showing up on Facebook. All the old Chamorro people are tuning in on Facebook, like the artifacts are calling to them, and they're all liking it now.
Awesome. Well, I mean, that's the joy of doing these returns, because I often think, when you are, I reflect on this a lot as a diasporic tomorrow. Like, how can I be in service to my people when, for a variety of reasons, like I'm not physically home with you all the time, and thinking about like Maori who say, like, thinking of folks who are keeping the home fires burning. Like, I think of our islands all the time. So in my position and in this, the privilege that I have to be in these spaces, like how can I be in service to our islands and to the carrying on of our culture, and helping in some way towards our our self-determination as a people. And you could be in a museum and do this kind of work, and it aids in all of it. So I think it's a great example for folks who might not be back home in the Marianas. Whatever your pathway is and whatever kind of work you do, like you can be in service to folks back home. It just can look in different ways. And to me, getting belongings home is part of it. And when this process was happening right before you came out, Maget, and with Nicole, I spoke with a Chamorro who's based up in the Bay Area and who has family in San Diego. And she was asking, well, like, shouldn't some of it stay in San Diego because there's so many Chamorros in San Diego County? And I said, as a diasporic Chamorro who for a long time grew up in San Diego, and I'm very much a part of this community, and my family's invested in it here as much as back home. I told her, like, I hear you. And as again, diasporic, yeah, I would love to have things available to our people so that we can have pride where we are. That goes beyond like the bumper stickers and the shirts that you were saying, Maget. And having like real things that we can touch and be with and feel and see from ancestors way back to ancestors in more recent generations. But I said, as a Indigenous museum professional, I have to go with what our home people want. I turn to you all as experts. I look back home and say these things were taken in ways that they should have not been taken from our islands. And if it means that it's going to go home and maybe sit in a box over there for a while, that's okay, because it's better at home to help, really be stewarded with the people that are taking care of our islands in our place. Loans can happen, like we were talking about. This kind of exchange of belongings and ideas can continue, but it's under the Guam Museum or the NMI Museum maybe in the future. It's under, your people, like up back home, like what do people want? And we just follow with that. So I said, as a diasporic tomorrow, of course I want things here, but it's better to be at home. Our belongings under their care, our belongings belong to them, and then let people back home be a part of this conversation with us. And so it's a tug on both sides. Like I would love to have things in San Diego, but better it be home where it should have been in the first place, because many of the things that you were showing were taken during the naval period on island. It was a time of deep kind of cultural suppression, and this is a part of making right for what was happening. So many of the things you showed were taken by military personnel who ended up in San Diego eventually, and their families or that person themselves in the military gifted it to the museum. So some of the belongings will say, who the person in the Navy was that gave it. Their names might be on some of the belongings themselves. So it's important that, things get home, because our people move in great numbers, and so do our belongings. And I think there's, like you're saying, that call for things to go home to really help in that kind of cultural pride we need for our movements forward with self-determination.
No, Seduce Masi. And while we were talking, I was sharing some images of them, and we'll be looking at a few more. But like as Jesi was saying here, you know, these are examples of things that were donated by U.S. military that were stationed, in San Diego. And, there are some post-war items, but pre-World War II items for sure. The types of pitchers that people used on Guam before the war, or, things for chocolate, and then irons, quite a few irons. You have to make those nice Navy uniforms. Got to get them nice and crisp. And so, and it's, yeah, it's good to have pieces like this home. And as Lylliam mentioned, this this was just the first wave, because some of the pieces taken that were brought back in March by myself and by Nicole de la Duenas, the archaeological collections manager at the Guam Cultural Repository. Some of them are made from wood or woven materials, and so you have to be a little bit more careful with those. Because when they go through TSA and so on. And so, but this is one piece that didn't make it in the first wave. It has an example of all the useful woods of Guam on it. It's an amazing, an amazing piece though. And so it'll be so nice to have all these back. And what we'll do, let me just share another one, another set of images real fast because, and this was, I'm so glad that the Museum of Us hosted this, a presentation to sort of the community out there, the Chamorro community out there of the artifacts before the items went home. And, this was something which was particularly meaningful because, and this is one of the, there's so many layers, complicated layers of kind of sadness to this. Like these were there for, in some cases, a century. But they're just of that type of artifact where like they were probably never going to be exhibited, because it's just one of those donations off the street, and so, but the Chamorro community grows and it's for Pacific Islanders, it's a big part of San Diego. And so I think some Chamorros expressed like, wow, all of this stuff was here. And so when I was there for the week when we brought those items home, a lot of people were like, "Oh, this stuff was here," and so on. And so it was really important to have items on display, have a chance for some people to see them, to kind of talk about them. And there'll be more chances to see them when they're here, because, Jesi, hopefully when you come home in the next few months later this year, we can do a presentation here at the Guam Museum. We can talk about the history involved, the Homeward Project, and then put on display, a temporary display, the items that have been brought home. But this was yeah, this was really nice. And so I wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on this because, you know, in the past, these types of, I mean, nowadays it's more common, thankfully, to have these types of community kind of viewings or community kind of chances to see something before it goes home. In the past, it wasn't necessarily. Um, and so but I really appreciated this. Um, and so I wanted to hear your thoughts on kind of what it was like, because it was a very nice crowd, young and old.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah,
some,
that's my grandma.
Jesi will definitely recognize some of the old
Yeah,
and
don't
some of
say
the
that to
young.
her. She's probably on Facebook right now watching. Don't you call my grandma old? Um,
Some of
yeah,
the yeah, some of the esteemed of the
yes,
wise.
exactly. This was a highlight of the whole process. I mean, I loved working with you and Nicole and Leonard. Like it's been so meaningful for me, both personally and professionally. But having these kind of community days are the best. Like this is why we do what we do, is because our communities are living, they're thriving, and they're hungry for information about our past, which is a part of our present. So having folks come, I sounded the Kulu a bit late because I knew that once I did it, a lot of people would come. And I just wanted to have it be like enough for that time. And we'll do something else in the future when the next wave goes home. But again, we're using our home islands as the kind of first jump into what we're calling international returns under the Homeward Project. Because of our colonial situation, yes, we are Americans. Yes, we fall under that kind of jurisdiction and everything, but under NAGPRA, we're not recognized. So Lylliam and I can move forward in a different kind of way with our people. And so having the community day was a way to say, hey, folks, most of us had no idea that we had, over 100 different Chamorro belongings in our care. They've been, like you said, with us for nearly 100 years and some 100 years. And they've never seen the light of day and most likely will not at our museum just because of um, the stories that we're telling at the moment. So it's better that they go home. And it's a really nice way to bring our community and the diaspora together to see these things, our belongings. We had folks sharing stories. We had, like you saw my grandma, I was like, touch it, whatever you want, and allowing them to feel our stuff. Many of our belongings haven't been touched by anyone, let alone a tomorrow for ages. So it's so neat to see folks touch things and ask questions or say, I remember this. My grandma remembered the irons. Looking at how our families are tied to these belongings in one way or another. So it's just it's meaningful. I'm gonna bring many with me because I want my kids to see like this is normal. This is what it should be normal within a museum setting, that the expectation is that when communities call for things home, museums can take that action and do what is right and ethical and give people back their belongings, because you could tell a good story and not own other people's stuff. And I want, our Manumko down to our Famagutan to know that some museums are taking those steps. And the more that we do it and we share out, like in this setting, and we share out in other ways, the Homeward Project, it'll give other institution that kind of maybe that extra kind of push to make those steps too, so that returns aren't, I don't know, a scary thing for different places. Like it should just be a part of what we do, because look at what happens when you bring community together. So I'm really excited to see what folks back home think when they get to see what has been in our care for, a century.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so excited too. I'm so excited too. And we are almost out of time. And so I wanted to just share though, and then get some final thoughts though, because this was a hold on, here we go.
That's our team. That's part of our
Mhm.
team.
Oh, this was and so this is a special moment with the cases packed and ready with all of the first wave of items, of belongings, of artifacts, treasures that were returned. And so, this was yeah, this was after, several days of your team preparing things. We did the community viewing. We also had a professional development presentation, which I really enjoyed, meeting more people from the Museum of Us. And then it definitely made a lot more sense why the Museum of Us is so like so critical, and why both of you have such cool job titles. Why both of you have
Yeah.
such cool job titles. And so, but yes, I want to give both of you kind of a chance to share some final thoughts. And it can be final thoughts about anything that you would like about what the Homeward Project, about your work at the museum or this particular return, anything that you'd like, if you want to give a shout out to anything else. Um, but yeah, just a shout out to Museum Month. But what anything that you'd like to share? And so Lylliam, if you want to kind of go and share some thoughts first.
Sure. Yeah, I think like Jesse mentioned that, it's the highlights. I think that was a word that you used, like the highlights of some of this work. I think for me, a lot of this work behind the scenes looks like working with the belongings, looking at databases, doing research, doing a lot of reading, looking at files, scanning stuff, coordinating meetings. And I think it all leads up to these really incredible, beautiful moments of meeting amazing people and getting a moment to spend time together in person, and then seeing the belongings go where they're supposed to go. And it's all worth it, and I think it's the highlight, from all the nitty-gritty to connecting with people. And at the end of the day, it's a highlight because it's such a strong reminder that these belongings belonged to people. They belong to people now. They hold stories, and they offer such a strong opportunity for people to share those stories with the next generation. Um, and it's just I feel so privileged and so grateful to be a part of this long chain and this long network of all of us doing our part to tackle these injustices, and also to step into a hopeful future.
Just Masi, thank you so much, Lylliam. And Jesi, some final thoughts from you?
Oh, William summed that up so nicely. I say it all the time, like you can tell a good story and not own other people's belongings. And I stand by that. And any museum that is, some museums are getting behind these kinds of returns and others have, individuals who are really wanting to see changes. And I think that, we're museums as a field, we're getting there. And I think people are wanting to reckon with the histories of these places. And I think communities know where their belongings are, know where their ancestors are, and it's time to get their belongings home. And for me as a Chamorro, like I'm so proud to be Chamorro. And so when I got the opportunity to see our belongings, it was so special, especially because I didn't know they were there until I started this job. Um, getting to tell my colleagues and our trustees all about our home and our history as a people and why Chamorros are just the best, and also expand their understanding of like different kinds of collecting practices. We hear of certain kinds in particular colonial context, but ours in our islands has its own feel and flavor and trauma behind it because of the ways that our island has been used by the US and the military forces there. So it was just a real great opportunity to share the pride that I have for where I'm from, the kind of rich community we have, and to say, here's our history, here's what we're wrecking with, and in real time, like here's how we're helping like our people heal a little bit more every day. The picture you showed, we have a great team. I think that's a huge part of this work, making sure that you have people that stand with you, great teams that want to get this work done. And I'm just really grateful and feel privileged to be in a position where I can say, like, I get to return people's belongings home. Like how special is that, So I'm very grateful for the work that we got to do with you, Miguel. It is ongoing. It's an ongoing relationship. But anytime that we can talk about the Homeward Project and anytime I can talk about where I'm from, I'm always game to have those conversations. So Sizus Masi for having us.
Sidus Masino Hamzuna Dos, thank you to the two of you. And we didn't get to address many of the questions. There was quite a few comments and questions that came in, but you had lots of support from people who were tuning in saying, looking forward to people saying, I haven't visited the Museum of Us in a while, looking forward to visiting again. Proud of you and your efforts. Keep up the good work. Sidus Masi for your continued work and efforts. Ay mangina asunto toruena. Oh, this is a wonderful topic to be discussing. And then one question, which, Senor Noel, this will be an ongoing conversation for all of us to have, of course, is what museums in other states have Chamorro artifacts in them? And so, Hungan Senor, we will continue to be tracking them down, and we will need people such as Jesi, people such as my Auntie Fran, but also people, people from across the US and elsewhere to keep their eyes and their ears open, for where there might be artifacts. Because if as we see old institutions that have massive collections, sometimes it might be tucked away somewhere. It's card catalogs from a long time ago, and no one's looked at it for quite a while. And so you need people to kind of ask about it. You need people to inquire. You need people to kind of rattle the the collections cage to see what happens next. And so, but that will be, hanggang senyo, no, siyempre para makontinuhan na yan na konversasyon, that will be a continuing conversation. For sure. And so to the two of you, Lylliam and Jesi, Sidus Masi Purifanaton Midzu, thank you so much for joining for this Museum Month episode of Fanachu. I look forward to us continuing this work. But thank you for all the work that you have done for the Chamorro people, for the Guam Museum, but all the work that you're doing through the Homeward Project in general. Hugo Fagradesi Hamsu. Sa para Hamsu todos ni umega zanume ekungo que Stephen Apuestin episode Fanachu adios. Esta aquí manadlihi Tatlu.